Welcome to my presentation. In this presentation we shall see the basic concepts related to proportion. So the question we have is, what is a proportion? Let me write this here. What is a proportion? The way we can define or explain a proportion is as follows. A proportion is the equality of two ratios or two rates. So that's the way we can explain a proportion. So let me try to explain this by defining what a proportion is. If we have two ratios like this, A over B, let me write with another ink here. If I have two ratios, if A over B is a ratio, and if C over D is another ratio, and if these two ratios or rates are equal, then we can write it as follows. A over B is equal to C over D, and this is a proportion. This can be expressed as a proportion. Okay. Now, if I were to explain this a little bit more, if I were to write this ratio, A over B is equal to C over D, and if I call this as the first term, and if I call A as the first term, and if I call B as the second term, this is the first term, this is the second term, B, if B is the second term, and if C, we call it as the third term, and if we call D as the fourth term, then we can say that the first term and the fourth term will be called as the extremes. The first term and the fourth term will be called as the extremes. And then the second term and the third term are called the means. I'll explain this in another manner. If we were to write A, B, C, D in a row in this manner, and if we were to look at this, A and D are in the extreme locations of this in this row. Therefore, we call A and D as the extremes. And if you look at B and C, these are the means to get to these extremes. If we want to get to A, we need to pass through B. If we need to get to D, we need to pass through C. Therefore, these are called, B and C are called the means, and A and D are called the extremes. And therefore, sometimes the proportions rule is also called as the means extremes property. So the property now, we can explain this property in this manner. If A over B is equal to C over D, A over B could be a ratio or a rate, and C over D could be a ratio or a rate, then we can cross multiply these as follows. A over B is equal to C over D, and we're going to cross multiply the numerator of the first fraction with the denominator of the second fraction, and we take the denominator of the first fraction and multiply to the numerator of the second fraction, and this is the way it's going to look like. A times D is equal to B times C. So this is how we can write the proportions property and we will use these property to solve some simple examples in my next presentation.